Good afternoon and welcome back to the afternoon of our session. For those of you who are just joining us for this session, my name is Luigina Ciuoffo and today I will be moderating the overall program of events for the afternoon and introduce you to the speakers. So this morning we had a really interesting overview of the work done by the CultureLabs team on a variety of pilot projects. This afternoon is dedicated to policy aspects pertaining to the effective implementation of participatory approaches that involve underrepresented or disadvantaged groups or groups at risk of exclusion, particularly migrant communities, and of course through cultural heritage activities. First, we will listen to a presentation about the findings and policy recommendations resulting from the CultureLabs research and empirical work. And in the second part, we will have a roundtable discussion with partners from CultureLabs, but also with a number of distinguished guests who kindly agreed to join us today. They will represent different policy levels, countries, and viewpoints. Also, you probably noticed that we now have a translation service activated on Zoom between English and Italian. To activate it, you will see that in the Zoom main menu, there is an icon labeled interpretation. And by clicking on it, you can choose which language to listen to, English or Italian. Also, we will keep using the Q&A function to collect questions from the audience. Feel free to post your questions through this tool, and they will be then filtered by the moderator for the final discussion. You're welcome also to join the chat if you would like to share any other feedback on today. I think I've given all the kind of practical information, so it's time to introduce the first presenter for the afternoon, who is Wolfgang Boswick, who is a member of CultureLabs, sociologist and senior researcher at the University of Bamberg. The work that Wolfgang will present has been conducted together with Suvi Sillanpää, project planner in the CultureLabs project at the Finnish Heritage Agency, and with the contribution of all CultureLabs partners. Also, both Wolfgang and Suvi will participate in the panel discussion that will follow at the very end. Over to you, Wolfgang.
Yes, good afternoon. Thank you for joining us and participating in this afternoon session. I give a brief overview on the policy brief, which summarizes the aspects of cultural proceedings and experiences which are relevant for decision making and for policy making. The policy brief has some specific goals. The first one is to support the informed discussion among policymakers and decision makers in the field of cultural heritage work with knowledge, criteria, and ideas created from CultureLabs and founding CultureLabs. And of course, this is related to a wider goal, which is the realization of European policy goals regarding participation in cultural life and cultural heritage. There's a host of policy recommendations from various European actors, the Commission, the Council of the European Commission, the Council of the European Union, the Council of Europe, UNESCO, and others, which provide a framework of policy goals, which are orientation also for CultureLabs and also for these policy recommendations. They also try to briefly inform about key challenges and key experiences for realizing the participatory approaches in the cultural heritage work. Most of them are also directly from the experiences of the pilots, but also from empirical research. And they aim to contribute to social innovation for cohesion in societies, which have a high degree of diversity, which is the case for most of contemporary societies in Europe due to migration processes. The intended audience of the policy brief are firstly policymakers at the European Union, national, regional, and local level. As a matter of fact, the local level plays in that respect a very important role, but also a lot of decisions and frameworks are decided at the European and at the national level, sometimes also at the regional level. And the recommendations are addressed to policymakers who want to promote new and more efficient ways for effective implementation of participatory approaches and to promote them for fostering social cohesion and integration. The second main group is this decision makers in museums and other organizations from the cultural heritage sector, who are striving to reach out to communities which are still underrepresented, or had not very much contact to cultural heritage issues hitherto, and who also look into involving migrants and refugees in particular. And the last but not least group which is addressed by the recommendations are civil society organizations, which are active in that field of social cohesion, of civil society, and are interested in including cultural activities into their portfolio and into their activities. And the general approach of CultureLabs and also, say, the red line in the policy brief is to foster active involvement in cultural heritage activities for enhancing mutual understanding and civil engagement. That means it has a direct link to social policy goals, to realizing democratic societies, to realizing civil engagement, and to promote social cohesion. And this relates also to promoting interaction across communities, so that there are no parallel societies emerging, that communities are practicing going along with each other and networking among each other and contributing to the society as a whole. And the general goal related to that is to approach the existing diversity, which is a matter of fact in today's society, many today's societies, as an asset for the society and not as a handicap. And so that requires a specific stance, that requires to learn to deal effectively with that and to use the opportunities and the possibilities resulting from the existing diversity. And this is in particular related to the nexus between cultural policy and, in the case of migrants and refugees, the integration policy, which can be framed in general as briefly by the incorporation of cultural activities into the integration policy and the incorporation of diversity issues into the established cultural sector. And the relevance of these recommendations are based on empirical research and state-of-the-art research, which had been analyzed in the course of the project, and the results from the hands-on pilots. A lot of that we learned already this morning. And there is a significant relevance of cultural activities for integration policies. Just to illustrate it very briefly with a recent empirical finding, the German Quality Circle for Integration Policy did recently a poll among integration departments of German municipalities. It got responses from 32 cities and boroughs, which is about 8% of the total number in Germany, about the relationship to migrant organizations. So the involvement of migrant organizations into municipal affairs in various sectors. And culture and intercultural activities rank among the top 3. So it's had the highest ranking in frequent cooperation with migrant organizations, and also the participation of migrant organization members in municipal panels is very high. That's the blue line in that graph. And it goes along with religion, intercultural dialogue, and measures against racism and extremism. And a little bit lower in the 4th place, there's intercultural qualification of the administration as an issue, which is discussed and where cities already develop activities. Progressive cities do that. And in particular, the integration policy officers, the municipal ones, are very interested in that sector already. And the policy brief and also this presentation is structured into 5 sections, which deal with different aspects of the practical implementation of participatory cultural activities, and which are relevant factors based on our findings and should be considered also in policy making and decision making in institutions. And I go through them, step by step, outlining briefly the main key challenges and key recommendations. So the first one is the section on principles. So what are guiding principles for participation in cultural heritage? And this is very much related to cultural rights, which are an integral part of human rights. So there are unisono political statements by various European and international actors in that regard. And this, of course, needs to be translated into practical policy making. And in that respect, today already one question popped up, how to define culture. And here we have to consider a caveat. There's a serious risk, since culture is directly related to individual self-identification, but also to collective self-identification and creation of a collective we. It can be misused, and it had been misused often in the past. It can be turned into an essentialist token for mobilization of politics. And this can shrink the leeway for sound policy making and create quite a pressure on policy making oriented towards the common good. So this caveat has to be considered. It's not a remedy for all. It has also its pitfalls. And best way to deal with that challenge is to look to culture as a human practice. So it's basically, it has three main aspects. That's cultural heritage as a general repository of symbols and traditions. And secondly, cultural creativity, which people have and are exercising, is the making of new symbols and meanings in addition to the traditional ones. And cultural symbols as the workpiece, which is active in that field, are symbolic tools which can be used by the individuals to construct their own way of living, and also by the society to express and self-represent the society and cultural mainstream in the society. So focusing on the individual point of culture, the individual realization of cultural participation, and the significance of culture for human beings is a good way to overcome that essentialist approach, and focusing on participation in cultural activities for visibility and representation, also for hitherto excluded people, is the way we are trying in the CultureLabs project. So culture as a human practice. And nevertheless, the entire exercise is addressed also to the general public in the response to diversity. So to increase the capability of the general public to deal with the de facto diversity. And this also is related to and linked to cultural heritage of the receiving society, as Abe today pointed out, that a lot of people are disengaged from official culture activities and need to be involved as well, not only disadvantaged groups or groups hitherto excluded. And key recommendations in that sector are that support by political leadership is of prime importance. So it's really necessary that the political leadership takes a clear stand to support projects and approaches in that respect and communicates along. And this is also related to the need for transparency in public communication. So to present the purpose of such measures and such activities, the expected results and the benefits for the general public, so that it's framed as of something which is relevant for the society as a whole, and is not orientated on deficiencies of specific groups or targeting specific groups. This is a quite important aspect as well. Then from the means which are very relevant for implementing such activities are, of course, the resources. And here in particular, if you approach participatory methods, you need innovative methods, and they require substantial investments. These are often new, and as we learned in the morning presentations and discussions, require quite some efforts and investments, personal investments as well. And in that respect, in particular, short-term project funding is problematic for prolonged cooperation and institutional innovation processes, which could result if projects are successful and are prolonged after the initial funding. So it should be balanced. It's necessary to look beyond single initiatives with the short-time funding, which disappear after that because they cannot sustain. And it's necessary to find ways to mainstream them. And key recommendations in that respect are funding for long-term equitable partnerships across the sectors and multidisciplinary networks for innovation. One observation of today's morning discussion had been that cultural institutions are often not very well equipped to deal with the challenges from participatory work. And here, of course, there exists a lot of experience and a lot of expertise at the regional and local level and other institutions. So across sectors is very important, and also to involve experts from other professions into these activities, at least so in a supporting role if punctual needs pops up. Then it's also necessary to have a long-lasting and long-term effect to invest in structural changes and in new capacities among the institutions, but also among the cooperation among the stakeholders in the field and the various sectors. And one aspect in that respect, in the respect of resources, is also that in particular migrant organizations and cultural activities of migrant organizations face a serious lack of spaces for their events, for their activities, and sometimes also simple material resources such as speaker equipment or tables and chairs and not only rooms. And for that respect, it would be very helpful if there could be organized a pool at the local or regional level, where with an equitable booking system, migrant organizations who want to engage in such activities can get the necessary means. The second type of resources, which is very relevant in the second section, is staff competences. So for implementing participatory approaches, you need professionals with intercultural competences and inclusion-oriented skills. And they also need knowledge about community needs and perspectives. And in particular, cultural institutions often have no very concrete ideas about the needs and the expectations from other communities. So they should rely on external expertise, for example, from the integration policy sector or from the civil society sector. And sometimes there's also necessary to link to contact and involve external expertise. An extreme case would be, for example, traumatized victims, when the trauma pops up in the participatory work. But already on a lower level, this need comes up as for example, Suvi told about this morning. And key recommendations in that respect are that it's a good idea to document local and regional expertise and relevant institutions. Say a database on the regional level, which gives an inventory, kept updated inventory of competences that could be single experts for specific issues, could be also institutions which have specific networks relevant for that sector, or could have specific activities and links to the fields, which could be linked to the planned project. And further, training and skills enhancement for staff in cultural and social policy sectors, and in particular also at the middle management level, is well advised to implement something like that, because if you have a good plan and your staff doesn't implement it, is unwilling or incapable to do that, that doesn't work well. And of course, since CultureLabs also is related to digital tools and skills, also here an upskilling of staff members is sometimes necessary. And for that purpose, online training models could be helpful. Then for implementing such projects, a very relevant aspect is the assessment and the evaluation of participatory projects. So every social policy should be evaluated. But in terms of participatory projects with co-creation aspects, very specific evaluation approaches are needed, which also help for steering the project's process, as well as assessing the outcomes of participatory projects. And for such evaluation approaches, there's knowledge needed on methods and also in particular for indicators which fit to these target groups and which fit to this approach. And in particular with participatory approaches, quite some flexibility is necessary. And the evaluation concept and framework has to consider that. But if this is done, then process accompanying evaluation, which is outcome oriented and process oriented, can deliver a quite relevant support for steering the project and giving valuable feedback. And key recommendations in that respect are the development of frameworks and methods for assessing participatory projects. Here is still some research to do, and in particular in relation to cultural heritage. Then to use flexible evaluation methods for assessing the process and outcomes, and not doing the typical mistake to focus primarily on mere outputs, which are not necessarily linked to outcomes. And often it will be necessary to provide external expertise for setting up evaluations, because this is really a field for specialists as well. An important aspect in CultureLabs is the digitalization, the use of digital tools, then the inclusion and dealing with diversity in such projects and such activities. And in general, digitalization and open access to digital repositories offer valuable opportunities for participation, and in particular also for resources which are highly relevant for diaspora spread communities across on an international level, which can use these repositories via the internet and can contribute to that. But on the other side, there are clear barriers. So it's necessary to have inclusive designs. The design of these platforms and these digital tools have to respect the knowledge and the needs of the target groups. And the accessibility is also an aspect. So internet access and the necessary equipment should be provided. Here, for example, public libraries can play an important role if, for example, migrants or refugees don't have direct access. And one important aspect we face today already in the chat is spamming and the risk of hate speech in interactive platforms. So really dedicated efforts should be made to ensure a safer space also in the digital space. And this is very critical for interactive platforms in particular. And key recommendations in that respect are that the use of digital means should also be needs driven and should never be imposed on communities. So direct means of engagement are very, very important, and they should be always considered. And as Marzia said this morning, technology cannot replace direct human interaction and direct human contact. It can be a valuable tool and it could give a great contribution, but it's not a solution for everything. And in that respect, there's still research necessary on the digital exclusion affecting migrants and vulnerable groups necessary, and that should be considered, that every measure and use of digital tools can have unwanted effects in that respect. So beyond that very, very brief overview on the policy brief, there's more information available on the CultureLabs website. So that's the policy paper, Cultural Heritage for Social Innovation and Migrant Inclusion. It's a 24 pages policy paper, which is available for download and gives quite a good overview and also some details on that what I briefly presented. And also further resources, such as recommendations for organizations towards constructive communication with communities, which is in the section on deliverables of the project. And that all can be found on the CultureLabs website under the subheading resources. So thank you very much for your attention, and I look forward to an interesting discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Wolfgang. And we'll also share the link to the resources so that people can go and find the policy paper as well, as you have suggested in your presentation. So there will be time to put some questions to Wolfgang and also Suvi at the end in the kind of a open discussion. But first, I'm going to pass on to Eirini, who is the coordinator of CultureLabs for those people who have just joined us this afternoon, Eirini Kaldeli from the National Technical University of Athens, who will introduce our guest speakers and also then moderate the discussion to follow. Eirini.
Okay, thank you, Louis, for introducing me. So there is a technical problem that I may be facing. I may not be able to listen to the English translation of Councillor Ciuoffo. I hope Louis could probably help me with this by writing down at least the highlights of what Councillor Ciuoffo will say. But let's try to start. Thank you, Wolfgang, for this comprehensive presentation, which sets the context of today's discussion and already points us to a lot of interesting aspects which we can pick up and discuss further. And let me at this point welcome our distinguished guests, whom I would like to thank for their willingness to participate and the time they're devoting to our today's event. Let me start by introducing Sayedy, who is a professional intercultural mediator and trainer with lots of on-the-ground experience in participatory culture projects that involve migrants and refugees. Sayedy lives in Munich and was born in Afghanistan, where he studied sociology and social work. We also have with us Monica Urian, who is the program manager at the European Commission's Directorate General for Education and Culture, being responsible for international cultural relations. And it is also an honor to have with us Councillor Stefano Ciuoffo, Councillor for Immigration Policy at the Tuscany Region. Councillor Ciuoffo is in charge of immigration and social inclusion policies in the region, as well as for policies for local authorities. And it is a great pleasure also to have as a guest Councillor Luthfur Rahman, the Deputy Leader for Manchester City Council, who has also held the culture portfolio in Manchester for some time and is a well-known advocate for the role of culture in the development of the city of Manchester. Unfortunately, Councillor Greenhalgh will not be able to join us today. So I would like to take the occasion and to first give the floor to Councillor Rahman. The More in Common project and respective exhibition organized by the People's History Museum in the framework of the European Scale CultureLabs project has helped to build relationships across people and communities and has created amazing artistic responses to Jo Cox's life and her memorial war 5 years after her murder. So Councillor, what importance do you think creative and cultural participatory work has in celebrating diversity and ensuring inclusion in Manchester City?
Thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for having me at this event. Well, for me, I think culture is the thread that binds us all together, and events like the More in Common exhibition that the People's History Museum have organised, and other cultural activities that we organise on a regular basis in the city of Manchester, is the tool and the mechanism that helps us to build relationships and build bridges between different communities, different cultures and different backgrounds, having those events in our communities, rooted in our communities and led by our communities is crucial. You know, what we don't do in Manchester is a top-down approach where from the City Council, we think a particular event or an activity or an exhibition is something that the community wants. We actually involve the community and let the community lead on those activities, because they're the ones that create that space and that platform for people to discuss their differences, but then realize that they have more in common than they have in terms of their differences. And that's been our key to our success in terms of community cohesion in Manchester. And we saw that following the Arena attack back in a couple of years ago, when the public response from that Arena attack was, well, we will not be divided by these atrocities and these individuals who create havoc in our communities and cause these issues. And you saw the community response where people came together of all different backgrounds, all different faiths in solidarity. And that didn't happen by accident, and didn't happen as a result of one incident or one week or one day. It happened because over a number of years, we've really focused on empowering and supporting our communities in putting together activities, using culture, using festivals, using community days that bring people together from different backgrounds. What I've found on a regular basis actually is, if you live in a neighborhood and you have neighbors from different backgrounds, different parts of the world who come and contribute into a city, yet you never engage or interact or speak to them, then that creates suspicion, animosity, and a lack of understanding. Having that conversation, having those community days, having those street parties, using culture, using arts, using activity is a means to get people to talk and then realize, well, actually, we're not any different. We are humans and we're all very much the same, and we have the same ambitions and aspirations. So for Manchester, cultural activity, community activity is really important. And that's something that we really believe in, and something that we think helps to bring people together and makes Manchester the diverse city that it is.
Thank you for your answer, Councillor Rahman. So I think we got an impression about the situation in Manchester, and I would like to give the word to Councillor Ciuoffo and ask him about the situation in the Tuscany region, which I presume faces similar challenges, especially with respect to the lack of understanding, probable lack of understanding between migrant and non-migrant communities. So I know that the Tuscany region is running several projects and initiatives aiming at the integration of asylum seekers and migrants. What role do you think culture and cultural activities play in this context?
First of all, good afternoon to you all, and thank you for your invitation. I thank Fondazione Toscana, who represented our region within this important work. Migration, welcoming, integration, social integration are very important issues which are affecting Europe as a whole. In terms of cultural background, in terms of approach, I think that paradoxically, Italy is pretty young. So that is why we basically are experiencing a phase when the ideological approach is very strong and over the years divided our communities. So over the years, these issues turned to be political issues, and that engendered conflicts and clashes among politicians. Within this context, Tuscany region wanted to have a stable standpoint. Tuscany region wanted to focus on people rather than on ideologies, To us, a migrant is a citizen, is a part of our community. Sometimes these citizens are passing by, as it is often the case for us. But migrants for us are members of our community. That's why we have to talk, to listen, to understand. And this is what Tuscany region has tried to do, despite political changes at the government of our country. But I do not want to go into details with that. Nowadays, we are finally aware that integration is part of our future. Regardless whether we are travelers, citizens, permanent citizens, integration goes hand in hand with participation. That is why we have to leave aside dangerous ideologies. That's why we have to translate our ideas into actions, into initiatives. That's why what Wolfgang said is very interesting to me. You identified methods, you identified problems, criticalities, priorities, as well as possible solutions. This is what institutions should do. This is what European communities should do. That is why I think that if we start from the idea that integration, welcoming new citizens is very important indeed. That's why we have to share cultural values. Once again, sharing does not mean that those who come to Italy must know who Dante was, or they have to go to the Uffizi. There is no priorities. I mean, it's just a way to share. We have to tell what we are, listening carefully to the others, to the ones who come. We have to be able to acknowledge migrants' cultural heritage and their dignity, the same dignity which allow these people to have their own identities, to have their own values. Each of us has a culture, whether it is an Eastern culture, African culture, Tuscan culture. There are no priorities. We do not want to have the wrong approach. I mean, we have, first of all, to stand for welcoming. So we have to try to rescue people, rescue migrants in the seas. This is a duty for any human being. We have to rescue lives of these people who cross the seas in very awful conditions. But in addition to that, we have not to think that these people represent a problem in terms of numbers, of figures. They represent pathways we have to go through. We have to welcome these people. We have to host these people. We have not to close them into a fence, trying to limit a problem, as it was the case in the past. We have to avoid new ghettos in this new civilized Europe, because a ghetto is never a solution. So we have to try to be all aware that it's a problem in terms of facilities, of structure. That is why you are in the right direction, and it's a pleasure for me to listen to what you are doing. We have to have right expertise and skills to welcome, to host. We have to train people in order to let them be able to listen, to welcome these people. They have to listen to migrants, whether their backgrounds are happy or not. We should welcome young people. Sometimes these people got a university degree in their countries, and here in our countries, they are ready to have very humble jobs. Despite they have a very good education. So our country, our region is aging, is getting older and older. So we need young people, we need dynamism, we need new people, new workforce, and new skills. So often I say, talking about all the projects the Tuscany region is implementing, I often say that we shouldn't implement spot projects depending on EU financing. We have to guarantee continuity. We have to build up a network. We have to set up a continuous pathway with reference points, which are always there, accessible, known. We have to let people know what institutions can do. We have to talk in a modern language, and digitalization is a very useful tool to do so. I believe that going through this pathway, trying to share, trying to respect mutually, trying to acknowledge cultures, this is the way for us to really solve problems and to implement an effective integration for a peaceful coexistence. Europe as a whole, Italy, Tuscany really need that. So thank you very much for your work. I think that we are on a tough pathway, but this is the right way to go. And I hope that people will know our projects. And I hope that these projects will be effective because our projects are well-based. Thank you very much and have a fruitful work.
Nice words also about our project, and I'm very happy to see this because also in CultureLabs we have realized that it is very important for culture participatory projects to flourish. It is very important to have the support of the local and regional authorities, also in the form of statements, but also active support. Let me now move to the EU policy level and ask you, Monica, what are the Commission's plans and upcoming initiatives with respect to promoting cultural heritage, especially with respect to leveraging its potential for improving social well-being and cohesion from the broader perspective, not just towards the integration and inclusion of migrants, but in general for promoting social cohesion and engaging different communities.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me? Yes, all fine. Thank you so much for the invitation. I also connected this morning and I listened to a pilot project. I wanted actually to be the whole day with you, but it's a bit difficult in this moment because we are just preparing the participation of our commissioner to the G20 meeting in Rome, cultural ministerial meeting. And since we are talking about cultural heritage, you will be, I hope, very pleased to know that it's one of the most important topics of this meeting, and the Italian presidency of the G20 is preparing a ministerial declaration. You will see more about that at the end of July. So this kept me from listening to the other pilot projects, but I think it's a very interesting setting that you have created here, where we listen from the cultural organizations themselves. This morning, we also listened from participants in the activities of the pilots. We listened from local and regional representatives, which are very important for us. And then, of course, I will modestly try to bring you some ideas from the European level. I mean, you know, it's a very broad topic, so for sure, it's not possible to cover everything. We have worked on heritage for a long time now, and actually this work has already started to crystallize. Already in 2014, we had this communication on cultural heritage towards an integrated approach to cultural heritage in Europe. And since then, we worked a lot on participatory governance and on the value of heritage for society, you know, the economic, the social value, and we start now to work on the well-being and the health value. We also had we work, of course, you know, the peculiarity of our work is that we do not have, of course, competencies in this field, in the cultural policy field, and not direct competencies. So what we do is we bring together the member states, and we are also in a constant dialogue with the sector itself, so all the cultural and creative sectors. And we also talk a lot with cities and regions. So we are in a privileged position in my Directorate General, which is Education and Culture, to be in the middle of all this and to listen to everybody. It takes a lot of time and effort, but it's very rewarding in the end, because we understand a bit what is happening and how we can contribute. So, for example, in the dialogue with the member states, we have this work plan from the Council of the EU. And at one point in the past, in 2018, we had an expert group with the member states, so with representatives from every country which decided to participate, because it's a voluntary basis, on this topic of participatory governance. And this is a report that has been already published, and I'm sure you know about it. But you know, it's very important to share information and make sure that it trickles down and also it comes up to us in a balanced manner with member states authorities. Now, in this current work plan for culture of the Council, so 2019-2022, because it's always a 4-year plan, we have a specific topic on cohesion, social cohesion, and well-being. And I have had the privilege to work on this topic, and actually we organized last year in November a workshop with the member states. It was digital because of COVID, and we discussed these topics. And for example, in terms of well-being and aging, of course, cultural heritage is bringing an important contribution. I don't know if you know, but there was a Eurobarometer a couple of years back where Europeans interviewed declared that 71% of the participants in this survey said that their quality of life is substantially increased by living close to a cultural heritage place. We also have statistics in other Eurobarometers about how much, I think it's more or less the same, 70 or 75% of Europeans decide on their place to travel according to cultural heritage sites. So, you know, this is, I think, one of the sectors in which we have worked the most. Of course, we also had the European Year of Cultural Heritage, and I saw that the logo is still on your website. Thank you for that. The follow-up of the year has been the creation of a European framework for action on cultural heritage. And again, it's a human-centered approach. So, you know, the capacity of heritage is a common resource, a common good, and a non-renewable one, to bring people together in communities and create, you know, various paths of interaction. We have supported a very large number of projects on this topic, because of course I can link this topic of social cohesion, participatory governance with the larger topic of audience development, which has been priority of our Creative Europe program in the past generation of programs already, so from 2014 to 2020. And a lot of Creative Europe supported projects worked on cultural heritage and on audience development. So a lot of learnings from there. And we even had a specific Creative Europe call on the integration of refugees and migrants, and some of them were linked to cultural heritage, whether you know, material or immaterial, for example, through music. Now in the new Creative Europe program, which has just started and the cooperation calls are ongoing, social cohesion and well-being is one of the main axes on which projects will be supported. So again, we have 7 years and a considerable budget, which will continue to invest in these topics. And of course, in a more general view, we have the European Agenda for Culture, which has been adopted in 2018, so pre-COVID, which has social cohesion and well-being as again one of the axes, because of course program and policy go together, and the European Agenda for Culture is the blueprint of our cultural policy thinking for the next, let's say, 10 years. So you see, all this works in a coherent way. We have worked also a lot with the Council of Europe. I was personally involved in one project working on participatory governance that applied, I think, more or less the same philosophy as yours, which was called STEPS, where, you know, migrant communities were doing their personal maps of cities in Rijeka and in Lisbon. We also worked a lot with on the Faro Convention, you know, motivating member states to sign it. And we have had a project again with the Council of Europe called the Faro Way, because of course it's a very important convention to promote our values, you know, the value of cultural heritage for society, and in a political way, let's say, towards governments. I wanted to tell you also that we have an EU strategy for international cultural relations, where again we have one pillar on cultural heritage. So, you know, one of the 3 pillars is on cultural heritage. So definitely this is a sector where a lot of countries on many continents are very interested to work with us. The reason also is that it's very prominent in G20, where, you know, other players like Brazil, like Canada, like Indonesia are bringing very refreshing ideas about, for example, First Nations or indigenous communities, depends how you want to call them, and the link to biodiversity and so on. So it's a very, very rich field to explore, also international cultural relations, in which I work. And
I interrupt you here because I was curious.
The wrong with this,
CultureLabs is probably one of the last projects in which, funded by the EU, in which the UK participates. So you mentioned intercultural relations with different countries, and I was wondering whether there are any schemes that we can hope for in the future that refer to collaborations in the cultural heritage and beyond with the UK.
Well, the UK can participate in the Creative Europe program as a 3rd country, since the decision was taken on the UK side not to be a full member. So, you know, Creative Europe, I'm talking about Creative Europe because this is the program that we deal with in DG EAC. So about Horizon 2020, Horizon Europe, sorry, it's another story. So Creative Europe works on the basis of mutual agreements on which countries want to join the program. So it depends on the interest of the 3rd country, and this is why, for example, all the eastern and southern neighborhood are covered, and many of these countries are currently applying to be part of the program with full rights. For the UK, so they can be part of the program like a 3rd country, which doesn't have a specific agreement in this field, but it's still open. And of course, we have a lot of contacts with UK organizations, cultural organizations, which are, for example, members of our creative and cultural networks that we support through other funding strands in Creative Europe. And they are very active members through these networks. So I hope it was clear. I mean, the structure of the program is a bit more complicated. We have cooperation projects, we have cultural networks, we have cultural platforms, and so on. So it requires a bit more time, but that's, I think, in a nutshell, what I can say as a reply to this question.
Okay. Thank you a lot, Monica, for giving us this overview about ongoing and planned initiatives by the EU. And now that we have heard about several policy approaches and perceptions at the local, regional, and EU level, I think it is also very important to listen to the viewpoint of cultural associations and migrants associations who are working on the field and are organizing so many interesting co-creation projects. So Sayed, I'd like to give the word to you and ask you, what are the major challenges you encounter in the participatory work you're doing, especially in the last year, which has been difficult, I think, for most of us who are involved in such kinds of projects. And also, what kind of support do you think would be helpful from the local and central government side in your work?
Thank you very much. I'm honored to participate in this discussion panel. There's one biggest thing which is really important for me, that is social affiliation. And as I see it also here in Germany in the politics, how the politicians discuss about, they say, okay, yeah, culture and cultural heritage is the human rights. Everybody has the right to to discuss about, to have their own culture and cultural heritage. But I think there is just lack of concentration on this topic. Everybody talk about social cohesion, but I think we cannot promote social cohesion when we forget, when we ignore the social affiliation. As I see, for example, I see every day different kind of migrants and refugees where I'm working. They have a best job, they are working, they are studying, but they don't have this feeling, they don't have this social affiliation that they are a member of the society. They are just participating in their groups among of their culture. But I think it has to be at a stage. It has to be a stage there, a kind of opportunity. We are all the member of the society. All the member of society get together and they talk about their topics. We have to try to not separate the groups, not separate the society. We have to try to get together. And then we can talk about social cohesion when we have this feeling that we belong to this society. Let me make an example. There's a project which is called Kino Azul in Munich, where the refugees have the opportunity to choose a film, a movie from their home country. And they present it here in Munich, for example, by other festivals. They choose a movie, for example, from Pakistan, from Afghanistan, and they talk together with all members of the society about, and they talk, for example, about the politics. There was a movie, it was about the relationship between Muslims and Jewish people. I was there. All the members from the civil society, they had different kind of opinions and the politics. So in this point, so we have to make a kind of a stage where really all the members of the society, for example, as I said, also Jews and Muslims, they got from the civil society, not from the politics, from the civil society, they got together and they talked about the current situation. And it was a highlight for me, really. It was a highlight for me that suddenly they have just, they were just talking about one thing, how to make a peaceful society. They were not talking about, okay, this culture is like that and this culture is like that. We are better than this culture. Just your concentration was that how we could live together. I think this is really, we have to see that the culture and the cultural heritage is opportunity, is a kind of instrument that we can use to bring the people together. even from the civil society, not from not on the politics, from on the top. So we cannot. I think it doesn't bring much when all the politician and from the government authorities, they say, okay, you have this budget, so you can make some project to promote the culture and the cultural heritage, and to integrate the people who are living also, who are coming in this society. I think we have to just talk with the local people, with the local authorities. They are the people who can really bring these people together. And in this case, we from the European Union, there, I think this kind of projects so has to be promoted really in each country, in each EU country, and even in local villages. So that we have to look. So what we want to do when we are talking about cultural heritage, when we are talking about integration, how we can make a better integration. I think the people, for example, like me, I have also refugees background. For me, the most important thing for me was that I have the feeling that I am accepted in this society, that I can talk with other people, with a member of the society. I can talk about my problems, about my topics. So in this case, I am really, I'm the person who knows what is my problem. So we have to talk with these people, with the people who have different cultures, different traditions, and they can show us the way how we can really get together. I think that Wolfgang say, I have to confirm it. So we have to do the things from the civil society. That is really my highlight. Yeah, that was my experience. So, and since, for example, in Germany, in the last years after the Second World War, the people were talking about that the Turkish people, the Italian people, they are not integrated here in Germany. Even most of them, they could be able to talk German. Even they could speak perfect German, but they didn't have this opportunity really to engage in the society, to talk about their topics. They were separated. I think in this case, cultural heritage is really a big opportunity to get these people, that we don't make this this failure like past years. That since languages, not only the language is important, but also the access of social life, the access of social society, that the people really engage in, that they can promote themselves among the society, not between them, not between, for example, I am from Afghanistan, even I have the best job here in Munich, and I know many people, I have studied, but when I don't have this feeling, so I cannot integrate myself in the society. So they have to have the feeling that they are belonging this society. They are belonging. They can't, even with their culture, they could be belonging this society. And I think diversity is not a problem. How we can interpret it, how we can is civil society, how we could accept it. I think that is the most important things that we have to look about this social affiliation. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks a lot, Sayed, for your eloquent viewpoints. And I think it's very important what you said, that the possibility to have open dialogue across communities and to make communities, migrant communities and refugees feel part of the society, active members of the society, is a precondition for the success of culture projects. So we shouldn't see culture disconnected from all the social context and the problems we're facing as a society. So I would like to ask Wolfgang at this point. Wolfgang, you have had a wide experience with projects and policies for migrants integrations from several regions and cities in Germany. And as Sayedy has pointed out, collaboration across sectors, and especially collaboration between institutions and civic society, so kind of bottom-up approaches, seems like one of the possibilities for successful participatory approaches. What do you think is the role that and the elements that make such approaches successful, especially with respect to the involvement of civic society organizations?
Well, one constant observation in integration research, integration processes research is that migrants usually integrate very well, but they integrate in the immediate surrounding. That was formulated by Dominique Schnapper in 2000 in the FNATIS project, which looked also into the identification of young people with a migratory background in several European states. It was the 4th framework program. And one observation in that respect is also that if migrants integrate themselves, they start usually to identify on the local level first. So they identify with the city, with the neighborhood they are living, long before they think about the nation state or the region, or they identify as Europeans or with a cosmopolitan point of view. And this results in a situation where the real social contact is crucial and important for the integration process and for the self-identification, not only of the migrants, that holds true for every human being. And I think in that respect, culture has a unique quality because it offers the opportunity to make the counterpart visible as a human being. You interact on the ground of being humans interacting together in creative activity and learning about the culture of the other and learning about the other as a human being. I think this is a huge opportunity which culture can provide in that context. And in the German history of integration policies, also cultural activities already played an important role on the local level. So the city started quite early with activities in that respect. And I think that's the way to go. This, on the other hand, this is also related to another aspect. There's also the necessity of integrating the various subgroups of the hosting society. So the hosting society is not a coherent continuum. There are huge differences and there's a huge diversity there. And there are historical experiences of integration processes already in the host society, for example, from the times of industrialization at the beginning of the last century. And these are historical experiences where it can be tapped in and where on the local level, civil society groups can engage, and also cultural work can engage in describing processes in the society, making that understandable, making the history behind it understandable, and support personal interaction in that context. And I think what Sayedy said in that respect is very important, that the social affiliation is important as a part of an integration process. It's basically the creation of kinship, of having something jointly together shared as a viewpoint, as an impression, as a goal by personal interaction. And that, of course, is a difficult process, and it lasts, and it has many dimensions, and it's not easy, but that's a way to really promote social cohesion. And I think there's a caveat related to that, of course, there are conflicts involved, conflicts over resources like working places, like housing, like visibility in public spaces, like parks, and of course habits and communities which are linked or keep among themselves. And it's important not to negotiate these processes on a moral level only. So of course there's a moral and value related perspective there, but I think it's dangerous to link opposing views, which might be sometimes outright xenophobic or even racist, to link them only as morally bad. It's necessary to involve these parts of the society also in the discourses and take their worries and their concerns serious and discuss them, not delegitimate them, but put them in context. And there really the key is via the culture as vehicle to have interaction between human beings and making each partner in this discourse visible as human being and not as the other. So I think this is a general approach which I would recommend, and which also worked pretty well in many cases of integration policies at the local level, with cultural involvement and without cultural involvement, more in the social policy field.
Thank you very much, Wolfgang. And I think this partly also provides an answer to a question we have from Alda about the distinction that Sayedy also made between social cohesion and social affiliation, and as a social affiliation being the first step towards achieving cohesion. So I think you must probably address this section, this part of the question. And before moving to another question, again by Alda, I would like also to ask a comment by Councillor Rahman on this, on the appropriate way in which local authorities can tackle the issues related to xenophobia, and how they can involve these parts of the populations who are skeptical about migrations, who often have prejudice towards migrants and refugees. And what is your comment on this?
For any of those issues, the most important thing is to create comfortable, open, safe spaces for conversations, a platform where people can come without having to worry about any repercussions about what they say, and be able to be really honest about their true feelings, and have the questions and issues that they are contemplating be addressed in a very honest and open and transparent way. That's crucial to kind of tackling some of those issues, because a lot of people have created within their minds prejudices and misinterpretations of other communities and other cultures, and it stems from what you see in the media, what you see created in a public forum about particular communities or ethnicities. And to be able to tackle those, you need the vast majority of people who are not inherently xenophobic or racist or hold these prejudices in a very deep-rooted way, to be able to have those difficult conversations. And what we do in Manchester, through a number of projects actually, is we create those spaces where different communities can come together and have conversations. So I'll give you an example. There's a growing increase in far-right activism in some parts of the city, and you know, kind of mistrust and prejudices against other ethnic groups around the city. And what we've done is we've facilitated debates and conversations between the two different factions, and brought them together and said, well, look, you know, have a conversation, see what the issues are, and see what is it that you're afraid of, because that's what it is really, isn't it? It's fear that is the root of xenophobia and other prejudices. So creating those spaces is really important for us, and we've done a number of those here. And again, it's not something that we should be facilitators as the local authority, not the not the people driving the conversation. The people driving the conversation should be the communities themselves. So we create the spaces, we facilitate, we organize, but it's got to be the communities and it's got to be the individuals who lead on those conversations. Otherwise, you don't get an honest reflection of what's going on, and you don't break down those barriers that exist that cause xenophobia and other aspects. So, we've been quite fortunate in Manchester. It's a very diverse city. We have over 200 languages spoken in Manchester. It's a very cohesive city. We have our issues. We have our pockets of rising, whether that's far right or other forms of extremism, and we deal with it, because what we can't do is bury our head under the sand and think that these things will go away. The only way we're going to deal with it is by tackling it head on, is by having those conversations, bringing people together, creating the bridges and the links so that people can share their differences and come up with solutions, because ultimately what we need is solutions. That's the Manchester way of doing it, and so far we've been quite fortunate. But again, culture and arts and creativity have played a crucial role in that, because trying to bring somebody in for a difficult conversation on the basis of just a difficult conversation is not always as appealing or interesting for somebody to come along. But using an art form or some form of creativity or culture to bring people together in the first instance, and then start engaging with those difficult conversations, is a much better medium and tool to apply. So that is the core principle that we've applied in Manchester, and so far it's proved quite fruitful for us here.
Thank you very much, Councillor Rahman. And I would like to ask Councillor Ciuoffo about, and before putting this question, I would like to remind the audience that you can use a translation option from Italian to English. And I was curious about whether the Tuscany region adopts similar approaches, so facilitate the creation of spaces in which different communities can come together, and probably also facilitate. Okay, so Councillor Ciuoffo has left. Okay, sorry, I didn't take notice. Sorry about that. So let me then reframe the question and okay, Councillor Ciuoffo is having a technical problem. Probably he may be able to join us again before the end of this conversation, which we are approaching actually, where we have 10 more minutes to discuss. And in that case, then I would like to pick up the question by Alda, addressed to Sayed. The question is, we know the most difficult thing often is to engage people who actually resist immigration to the EU and would prefer public money to be used to create barriers rather than destroy them. Have you ever experienced someone with that kind of attitude having changed his or her view thanks to a culture project?
Yes, sure. Here's an example. So in a village here near to Munich, close to Munich, it is called Unterhaching. 2015, the city of Munich has decided that there has to ground a refugees camp. But the local people, they were resist against everything, even resist this refugees camp. They said, no, we don't want that the refugees camp will build here. They were against that, yeah. But 2 weeks later, there's, I don't know, a Volkshochschule. So where the people, also the elders, the old people have the opportunity to take a part in different kind of workshops. I have arranged a movie evening. 3 refugees have chosen 3 films from different countries. One, it was from Nigeria, from Afghanistan, and from Syria. We have been there, we have shown these 3 films. After that, it was a discussion. All most of the people who were living, the local people in this village, joined this event. And afterward, there was an open discussion. All the people had an opportunity, the local people who resist this refugees camp, they had the opportunities to talk directly with these people, with these refugees. And they were saying about their fears, about their concern, about their, and I asked personally, I said, what is the problem? Why you don't want that this refugees camp built here? That the authorities, the city of Munich, build this refugees camp here. They said, so since now we didn't have any kind of trouble here in this village, but I have heard in the news, in TV shows, etc., that the refugees bring problems, troubles. They do this one, they do that one. And after that, so they, how can I say? So it was really an open dialogue that they had the opportunity to talk about their concerns. After that, really, most of them, almost 57% of this local people have signed that this refugees camp could be built in this village. They have signed after that, because before they have this concern that it could be like that, it could be like this. But what I said, what I want to say is this, that we have to come together. We have to talk with these people who really resist against refugees and migration and etc. So if we don't open a dialogue with these people, so we can't do anything. We can't say migration is a human right, cultural heritage is a human rights. So it doesn't bring. We have to really talk about the concern of these people. So I'm not talking about how to say extreme politicians who resist the migration. I'm talking about the local people. I'm talking about the civil society. We have to talk together in the civil society. So after that, we could also change in politics, in policies, yeah. That was really my experience, that the local people have signed that this refugees camp could be built in this village. Yeah. Even most often they were, how to say, they were really extreme and popular parties here in Germany, like CDU, CSU. They were completely against refugees in this village. But we could make it really to open a dialogue, to talk with these people. We cannot, how to say, we cannot just erase the concerns, the problems of these local people. We cannot say from politics and from top authorities that the people have to accept or have to engage with these topics, migration, integration, cultural heritage. We cannot do like that. I think we have to talk really with local people in civil society, then we could make it, yeah. That is my experience, thank you.
Thank you very much, Sayed, for sharing with us this very specific example. And which actually proves that dialogue and discussing with people can make a difference, actually, also changing also the viewpoint of people. This is the way to go. And Monica, I would like to ask you whether this is something considered by at the EU level, so the creation of spaces for dialogue across communities, and whether what is the role that you think and the impact you think culture as a glue can play in this respect, so to open up dialogue among different communities and have real social impact.
Yes, thank you for bringing me in. I was thinking, when I joined the European Commission in 2007, it seems like a century ago, but I was really fortunate to start directly working on the European Year of Intercultural Dialogue in 2008, which was really a milestone, I think, not only for my personal life and career, but also for the EU, because we worked so much on these topics already back then. And of course, we did not have yet the refugee crisis, and we had different crises ongoing. This is a fact of life, but then things got a bit even more intense. And I remember we did a Eurobarometer again, so the survey with towards all the member states, asking people about their attitudes towards the other, and it was clear there that people who had a real, like in real life contact with people of other origins, or whether ethnic origins or other who are called other religious beliefs and so on, so diversity in its different forms, sexual orientation, etc. They were much more understanding of the worldview of these persons, and they were much less scared. And as Sayed said, if you have never met these people, you can imagine a lot of scary things because of the influence of the media, which unfortunately carries a lot of negative reporting about and some ostracizing of certain communities. So since then, for me, it has been very clear, and this is what we are trying to do with our policies and with, especially with all the projects that we fund, to create this real interaction. And indeed, it's a very, it's like a luxury jewelry, let's say, or it's a very intricate, very complicated, it needs a lot of time, and it's a skill that you build over time, but you cannot go beyond it. You cannot think that just because you have a convention or a beautiful text, or whatever kind of the Human Rights Declaration and this and that. Yeah, it is a human right. Culture, access to culture is a human right, but if you don't practice it, it remains just on paper. And I wanted to invite you also to reflect on what you can do as cultural organizations, because of course some things are beyond our control. We are not able to control how the state media or or different influential media, whether state or private, are reporting on certain topics, but we can practice what we preach. And here I want to make the connection between democratization of culture and cultural democracy, because in the end it is about democracy. So access to culture is a right, but if you it's also in integration is a two-way street, like intercultural dialogue. It's a two-way street. Everybody has to contribute, and we put a lot of emphasis on what the people who arrive here have to do, and speaking the language, learning how we work and so on, how we live, etc. But we are not as curious as we could be towards their original culture. And of course, everybody carries a culture with them, whether they have an education or formal education or not. This is not the question. But are we really open? And here it's our role to question ourselves and our institutions. Are we really open to hear more about what other cultures brought to European culture that we are so proud of in the course of history? And when you start to dig into this question, especially you as researchers, you find some very interesting things. So it's a two-way street, and I think cultural organizations have a huge responsibility to not to practice democratization of culture, which is come here and we'll teach you what you need to know in a very simplified, in a nutshell, because we are at the end of the conference. But it's the other way around. It's cultural democracy, meaning we really give you cultural, we support you to increase your cultural capital and your cultural capability, which is the combined freedom to speak, to express, to be heard, to experience, to make, to build, to contest, to create. So, really being open also to criticism and question our values. And this is also important in the EU connection or relationship with third countries, because we are trying to go with this EU strategy for international cultural relations that I mentioned, beyond this, post-colonial European style where we were such an important continent in the world, in a more eye-to-eye level, and really an open and respectful dialogue where we learn with others just as much as we try to share with them. So I hope this is somehow useful for our future reflection, because we have to keep changing and questioning ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Monica. There are of course, like a number of topics that we didn't have the time to explore, also mentioned during Wolfgang's presentations, and we also still have open questions from the audience. But unfortunately, we're running out of time, I think. It's very positive that people want also to establish contacts with each other, and please feel free to contact us also after this discussion directly, and we can exchange also email, like share contact details with you, so as to follow up and think also of possible collaborations afterwards. I'm also referring to Alda's question on the question and answering section, which unfortunately we will not have time to discuss in a live manner because, yes, as I've said, we have run out of time and we are approaching towards the end of this event. So I would like to thank all our guests and all our presenters and the CultureLabs partners for participating today, and give the floor back to Louis for closing, for the closing note for today.
Thank you very much, Eirini. My job really is very easy at this point. Just to yet again say thank you. First of all, to our guests, our invited panelists who gave their time to be with us today and to give us so many interesting ideas and contribution. But also thanks to all, so kind of a reciprocal pat on the back for all the members of CultureLabs who have presented, but not only that, who have done such wonderful work during the past 3 years. And thanks for the attendees who have joined us today for this event, for the questions and the comments that you have posted. You've raised so many important points that then fed into our discussion, and you really contributed to what I really think has been a really rich day, full of ideas, challenges, but also hopefully inspiration and willingness to embark on future projects. As Eirini says, please keep in touch. You can find out much more about the work that all partners and CultureLabs have done in the past 3 years at our website. We're also active on social media where you can see more videos, blogs, and a lot more detail about also the pilots that you heard about this morning. And of course, get in touch with us should you wish to find out more, or should you want to partner with us for future collaborations. So thanks again for being here today. And on behalf of the entire CultureLabs team, have a nice rest of the day and goodbye.